A Stanford study couldn't explain it. Researchers tested two groups on detecting liars. Adults who grew up pre-internet scored nearly double, not because they were smarter, not because they were more educated, because of something that happened or didn't happen between ages 6 and 12. Something so ordinary, so completely unremarkable, that nobody thought to protect it when it disappeared. Boredom. Not the restless, phone-in-hand kind, the deep kind. The kind where you're stuck in the backseat of a station wagon for 4 hours with nothing but a window and other people's faces. You learned to read those faces, every twitch, every fake smile that didn't reach the eyes, every nervous laugh that lasted 1 second too long. You didn't study this, you absorbed it. Thousands of hours of uninterrupted human observation burned directly into your social circuitry. That circuitry is now being starved, and the cost is higher than anyone is talking about. Here's what's actually happening inside your skull when you sense something is off. Your brain runs two systems simultaneously during every social interaction. System 1 is fast and automatic. It's scanning faces, voices, and body language before you've consciously registered a single word. System 2 is slow and deliberate. It's processing the content of what's being said. Most people only trust System 2. The words, the logic, the story. 70s kids trusted both. The key player in System 1 is the anterior insula, a region buried deep in the cortex that integrates physical sensation with emotional reading. When something doesn't add up socially, the insula fires. You feel it as a knot in your stomach, a sudden flatness in your chest, a pull to look away. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio called these signals somatic markers. His landmark research with patients who had insula damage found something striking: they couldn't make good social decisions. Not because their logic was broken, because they couldn't feel the wrongness in time. That's the first mechanism. The second involves mirror neurons. When you watch someone's face, your brain doesn't just observe, it simulates. Mirror neurons fire as if you're making that expression yourself. This is how you catch emotions like a cold. Sadness in a room pulls at you, nervous energy spreads. But here's the critical detail. This simulation system requires calibration. It needs thousands of hours of unfiltered face-to-face exposure during childhood to become accurate. Psychologist Nim Tottenham at Columbia University has shown that early social environments directly shape how the amygdala and prefrontal cortex learn to process emotional signals. Miss that window? The calibration stays rough, approximate, easily fooled. A 70-year-old who spent his childhood in a small town, watching neighbors negotiate, argue, flirt, and grieve, his mirror neuron system is tuned like a concert piano. A 22-year-old who processed most human interaction through a screen, he's working with an instrument that was never properly strung. This isn't an insult, it's neuroscience. And it gets worse when you factor in cognitive load. Every notification, every open tab, every half-finished scroll, it taxes your prefrontal cortex, the same region that helps you notice you're being deceived. Research by Sean Baylock at the University of Chicago showed that high cognitive load measurably impairs social perception. You miss micro-expressions, you fill gaps with optimism instead of accuracy. Your brain isn't broken, it's just full. Think about the last time your gut told you something was wrong about a person, and you ignored it. Comment the knife emoji below if you were right. 30,000 years ago, being fooled could get you killed. Not metaphorically, literally. A bad trade with the wrong person meant your family starved. Trusting the wrong ally meant your back was exposed in a fight. Believing a false signal of friendship from a rival tribe meant a spear in the dark. Humans didn't evolve in cities of 8 million strangers. They evolved in bands of roughly 150 people. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar identified this number, now called Dunbar's number, as the cognitive limit of stable social relationships the human brain can maintain: 150 people. Everyone knew everyone. Reputations were everything. Deception was high stakes and high visibility. In that world, your lie detection system wasn't a nice to have. It was infrastructure. The brain responded accordingly. It dedicated enormous resources to reading faces, tracking inconsistencies, and storing behavioral patterns of every person in the group. A single bad read could cascade lost resources, lost status, lost safety. This is why the system is so visceral. It doesn't send you a calm, logical memo. It hits you in the gut. It tightens your throat. It makes the hair on your arms stand up. These are ancient alarm signals, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of social survival pressure. Now drop that system into 2025. The mismatch is staggering. Your brain is still running tribal software in a world of 7 billion faces, anonymous usernames, algorithmically optimized manipulation, and social interactions mediated through glass rectangles. The system wasn't designed for this. It has no reference points for a profile picture, no way to read the micro-expression of a text message, no somatic marker for a deepfake. But the deeper problem isn't the technology, it's what the technology replaced. In a pre-screen childhood, boredom forced children into the single most important developmental activity in human history: watching other people. Sitting in church, waiting at the barbershop, riding in cars, listening to adults talk about things you didn't fully understand yet. Your brain was running silent background processing the entire time. Building a library, cataloging expressions, tones, contradictions between what people said and how their bodies moved when they said it. Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget argued that children learn primarily through direct, unstructured interaction with their environment. Not instruction, absorption. The 70s kid absorbed people. Thousands of hours of them. The modern child absorbs content. Curated, optimized, frictionless content that never lies to them, never has a hidden agenda, and never makes them sit with discomfort long enough to develop the muscles to detect it. Evolution built the hardware. Analog childhood installed the software. One generation quietly stopped doing the installation. And nobody noticed until the hardware started failing in ways we're only beginning to measure. This isn't nostalgia. The data's ugly. Start with Paul Ekman. In the 1960s and 70s, the psychologist at the University of California, San Francisco, spent decades mapping what he called micro-expressions, involuntary facial movements lasting as little as 1/25 of a second that leak genuine emotion, before the conscious mind can suppress it. Disgust, contempt, fear, they flash across a face and disappear. Ekman found that most people detect these expressions at roughly 50% accuracy, chance, a coin flip. But a small subset, he called them truth wizards, scored above 80%. When his team studied what these people had in common, it wasn't profession, it wasn't IQ. The single strongest predictor was a childhood characterized by high stakes, high volume face-to-face social exposure. Many had grown up in unpredictable or emotionally complex households. They had learned to read rooms out of necessity. Their brains had been trained young, and training stuck. Now look at what's happened since screens entered childhood at scale. Psychologist Jean Twenge at San Diego State University tracked generational data across 1.4 million American adolescents. Her research, published in her book iGen, identified 2012 as a sharp inflection point. The year smartphone adoption crossed 50% among teenagers. What followed was not gradual. It was a cliff. Empathy scores measured through standardized testing across decades dropped sharply. Loneliness spiked. The ability to read emotional cues in face-to-face settings measurably declined. Twenge's data didn't suggest correlation. The timing, scale, and consistency across demographics pointed directly at screen displacement of analog social time. The mechanism was confirmed in a landmark study by UCLA researcher Yalda Uls in 2012, the same year Twenge's inflection point hit. Uls took two groups of 6th graders. One group spent 5 days at an outdoor education camp with 0 screens. The other continued normal life. After just 5 days, the camp group significantly outperformed the control group at reading facial expressions and emotional cues. 5 days, no screens. Measurable neurological recalibration. That's how plastic this system is, and how quickly it degrades without the right input. Then there's the deception research. A study published in the journal Computers in Human Behavior found that individuals with higher daily screen time showed significantly reduced ability to detect dishonesty in live face-to-face interactions. Not video interactions, not text, live, in the room. The cognitive machinery was present, the calibration wasn't. The researchers noted something that rarely makes headlines: the deficit wasn't in intelligence or attention. It was specifically in the automatic System 1 processing that operates below conscious awareness. The fast, gut-level read that a 70s kid trusted without knowing why. That system doesn't respond to effort. You can't will it to work better in the moment. It either got built during the right developmental window, or it didn't. The window for most children today is full of other things. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The 70s weren't a golden age of human authenticity. People lied constantly. Politicians lied. Husbands lied, doctors lied, advertisers lied with complete impunity and zero accountability. The difference wasn't that there were fewer fakes. It's that the fakes were easier to read because they were delivered in person, with a face attached. And here's the second thing. Nobody says plenty of 70s kids were terrible at spotting deception. Children who grew up in emotionally flat households, with limited social exposure, or with caregivers who actively discouraged emotional awareness, they missed the developmental window just as completely as any screen-addicted 10-year-old today. The decade didn't create the skill. The conditions did. This matters because it reframes the entire conversation. The variable was never nostalgia. It was never simpler times or better values. It was something far more specific and far more replicable, unstructured, face-to-face, analog social immersion during a critical developmental window. Boredom that forced attention toward other human beings. Friction that demanded real-time emotional processing. Some 70s kids had that in abundance. Some didn't. Some kids today have it. Most don't. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Research by psychologist Nancy Kanwisher at MIT suggests the brain's face processing region, the fusiform face area, retains a degree of plasticity well into adulthood. Not the same plasticity as childhood, but enough. The system can be recalibrated, slowly, deliberately, with the right input, and there's a deeper nuance worth sitting with. Being deceived isn't always a failure of perception. Sometimes it's a social lubricant. Developmental psychologist Tanya Singer at the Max Planck Institute has studied what she calls strategic ignorance, the brain's tendency to selectively not notice certain social signals in order to maintain relationships, reduce conflict, and preserve group cohesion. Your brain sometimes knows and chooses not to know, because knowing would cost more than not knowing. This is not weakness. This is an evolved social function. Small tribes couldn't afford constant confrontation. A degree of willful blindness kept the group together. Your grandfather didn't call out every small deception at the dinner table. He weighed the cost. He let some things pass. The real skill was never pure detection. It was calibrated detection, knowing which lies mattered, which people warranted scrutiny, and when to trust the gut versus the relationship. That calibration requires exactly the kind of deep, long-term, face-to-face social immersion that analog childhoods provided naturally. It required knowing people, really knowing them, over years, across moods. Through stress and celebration and ordinary Tuesday afternoons where nothing happened and everything was quietly observed. You can't download that, you can't watch a YouTube video about it, but you can rebuild something close to it, and it starts with one decision that feels almost insultingly simple. You can't go back to 1976, but you can recreate the conditions that made it neurologically useful. Here's what the research actually supports. Step 1. Schedule boredom. This sounds like a joke. It isn't. Neuroscientist Mary Helen Imordino-Yang at the University of Southern California found that the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for deep social processing, self-reflection, and reading others, only activates fully during periods of undirected rest, not sleep. Conscious, unstimulated wakefulness. 20 minutes a day. No phone, no podcast, no background noise. Sit somewhere with other people, if possible, a park bench, a coffee shop, a waiting room. Let your eyes move across faces. Don't perform observation. Just stop filling the silence. Your default mode network will do the rest. It was built for exactly this. Step 2. Rebuild your baseline library. Ekman's truth wizards weren't born with special eyes. They built a reference library, thousands of cataloged expressions, tones, and behavioral patterns stored below conscious awareness. You build this the same way they did, through volume and attention. Pick 3 people in your life you interact with regularly. For 30 days, pay deliberate attention to the gap between what they say and how their body moves when they say it. Not to catch them lying, to calibrate. Watch for clusters. A single microexpression means little, but a tightened jaw combined with a slight shoulder pull, combined with a half-second delay before answering means something specific. Your brain will start filing these patterns automatically after roughly 3 weeks. Research on perceptual learning by Eleanor Gibson at Cornell shows this is how expertise in any domain develops, not through conscious analysis, but through pattern exposure that eventually drops below the threshold of deliberate thought. Step 3. Reduce cognitive load before high-stakes interactions. Remember Sian Baylock's research, a full prefrontal cortex misses things. Before any conversation that matters, spend 5 minutes doing nothing, not meditating. Not breathing exercises, just nothing. Let the mental queue clear. This isn't woo, it's resource management. Your deception detection system runs on the same neural bandwidth as everything else demanding your attention. Give it room. Step 4. Trust the body first. When the knot in your stomach fires before you talk yourself out of it, before you construct a logical reason why you're probably wrong, before you decide it would be rude or paranoid to trust it, write it down. Just the physical sensation and the context, nothing more. Do this for 60 days, then look back at your notes. Most people who run this exercise discover their somatic markers were accurate at a rate that shocks them. The gut wasn't irrational. It was just never given the credibility it earned. You were taught to trust words over sensations. That's a modern bias, not a universal truth. Your ancestors survived by reversing that priority. Step 5. Reintroduce friction. Seek out conversations that are slightly uncomfortable, disagreements you'd normally avoid, interactions with people whose emotional states are complex or ambiguous. Not conflict for its own sake, friction that demands real-time emotional processing. Psychologist Brené Brown at the University of Houston has documented extensively how emotional avoidance atrophies social intelligence over time. The uncomfortable conversation you skip is a calibration session your brain never gets. The people who can spot a fake from across a room didn't develop that skill by staying comfortable. They developed it by sitting in the backseat of a station wagon for 4 hours with nothing to look at but other people and nowhere to go but inward. That's still available to you anytime you choose it.